Welcome to episode number 2 of the Defend the Wild podcast. I am your host, Alix Livingstone. Thank you for joining me. Today, I am speaking with the wonderful Sophie Thomson, who is one half of the Wildlife Twins, a sister duo who have dedicated their lives to educating the public about Australia's incredible and unique wildlife for the last 7 years. In this time, Soph has worked with a huge array of Australian animals and has a particular passion for our top order predator, the dingo. Sophie is also an expert on working with dogs and runs her own successful dog training business, Canine Academy. In this episode, we speak about Sophie's experience raising wild-born dingo puppies and the differences she sees in wild-born and captive bred dingoes. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Cool. Welcome to the Defend the Wild podcast. We are on beautiful Bundjalung country today with Sophie, who is half of the Wildlife Twins. They do amazing education on wildlife around the northern rivers and Ballina area.
Anywhere that wants us. Welcome to the place, and we might have a few four-legged chaos friends running through, just to let people know.
That's
it's
exactly
all fun.
how we like it. We're at your amazing facility here.
Keeps the vibes up high.
So, just to start, I'd love to chat to you a bit about how you got into wildlife education and your background in dog training and kind of what led you on this path to, showing people how amazing wildlife are.
Definitely. All right. So, look, obviously I started off as a professional dog trainer, or wasn't professional once upon a time. But in saying that, I didn't realise dog training was a thing, and I just always frothed the connection and the relationship that, the dog and the human had together. And little did I know that there was work for it. So I thought, why not get into it? And it's a whole massive world that I really only feel like I've scraped the top off. But down the track, it's led me from my sister, my identical twin sister, Bridge, who's the other half, the Wildlife Twins. I'm 7 minutes older, by the way.
Oh, yes. That's very important.
Very important fact. 7. Yeah, 7 minutes. So she did a wildlife science degree and came back and started to get more into the wild side of things, of wildlife education. And from there, we actually started working closely together when Bridget got offered 2 captive dingoes for our wildlife educational shows. And from there, that's where we worked together, and it's grown ever since. So, yeah, it was a massive door that opened then, and I didn't realise what it would turn into. So
dingoes really have a way of opening doors, don't they?
They're amazing, and they've been hidden for so long. It's time. It's time.
Excellent. Which actually is what I want to talk to you about today, because you do have 2 captive-born dingoes here on your property, which I know you do your wildlife shows with, and also you have 2 amazing wild-born dingoes. And I think a really important conversation that needs to happen around dingoes is what makes a dingo a dingo. And I think, in conservation spaces, often there's this really huge focus on how much DNA an animal is, and that's what makes them that type of animal. Whereas I know that you've had the experience of spending so much time with your captive bred dingoes who are 100% dingo DNA, but then you've also had the experience of taking care of 2 wild-born dingoes, well, more actually, and you've seen differences in their behaviour, and that's something I think that needs to be discussed and is really interesting, especially since it dispels this kind of myth around the wild dog as well.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And look, it's such a massive topic. It surely is. And when you talk about any animal, and especially when you're working with animals in pet homes or in captivity or even just generally out and about, behaviour is such an interesting topic. And in dog training, we always say there's 3 things that predict behaviour, which is the personality and like the individual as such. You've got that also encompasses the genetics of the animal. So whether it's a pointer or a different species altogether or whatever that example is. Then you got how it's raised. So that's another big part. But then you've also got that moment, that second, that a day, that dogs or other animals are just like people. They can have good days, they can have bad days. So those are the 3 things. So when you're talking about those things together, it's a super interesting topic because, like I said, we've got the 2 captive dingoes here, the alpine dingoes, which are about 6 years of age now. So we have a fully licensed facility to do the wildlife education. We've put hours and hours of training into them. But then I've had a lot of experience with wild-born dingo crosses, especially in that area, and being a private dog trainer in this area. I've learned a lot of different experiences from this area and different stories from farmers to rural property owners and then other dingo owners themselves. So it's been super interesting. And yes, most recently looking after those wild-born dingoes, a full litter, and just seeing what behaviours that I'd never was like, whoa, I didn't see this coming, because I thought I would have experienced everything with the captive dingoes. But, mate, that is so wrong. Like I see a lot more hunting instincts, a lot more instincts such as, like, we're just talking about breeding season is happening at the moment. My male dingo, who's desexed, is all over my female shepherd at the moment, and I was like, why is this? It's breeding season. And then not to mention, like, it's just the dynamics between the whole pack is just extremely interesting. However, you also got to take note that these two dingoes, the alpines, they do live in a captive situation. My guys are more of in a pet home situation. We're much more socially structured because we have to live with each other, so that does change things, but there's so many differences. It's wild. I could talk for hours about it.
No, totally. I mean, it's an interesting one. Like in Victoria, for example, I was thinking about how basically the law states that if you have a dingo, and you have to have a license, basically. So you have to have a license, you have to have a special enclosure, you have to sort of tick all these boxes to have a dingo on your property. But interestingly, what defines a dingo in Victoria is 100% DNA dingo. And so if you've got a dingo that might be 70 or 80% dingo and 20% dog, then they're just considered a domestic dog. So you can register them as a dog. But then you're seeing, like, if you've got a wild-born dingo, they're going to behave potentially much more dingo than a captive bred, and you're more likely to get 100% dingo DNA from a captive bred situation, I suppose. So I just found that like a really sort of interesting inconsistency in terms of like the law, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure that that's put in place to sort of help with the lethal control of dingoes in Victoria, because if you can define a dingo as only 100% DNA, then that gives you sort of the green light to kill any other wild dog.
Not sure of, even though there's no testing done, which is ludicrous. But and it also it probably is also partly for the reason of, like, if people did have them as pets, you get that more connection, that relationship. You know, people like to touch, feel, see, be. You know, so that would be a part of it as well, I guess. You know, but in saying that, there's always a double-edged sort of things. You know, in Queensland, you can't have a dingo as a pet, but we don't see as many problems with people having them as pets simply because they don't have them as pets. And that's the biggest difference between dingoes and dogs in that space, in that topic, right? You see, the dingo, when it's a pet for someone, it could probably do just as much damage as any other canine. Like, you're talking in a massive spectrum. You know, all dogs came from an apex predator. You know, there's all different breeds out there that can do all sorts of bad things, and same as the dingo. But the dingo carries this massive story, and what happens is, if the dingo, compared to the Labrador or the Staffy or the Kelpie, that kills the chook next door, well, that just creates absolute horrible chaos for the dingo as a native species.
Totally. It's such a huge topic, isn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of like demeans them.
Yeah.
Like, it, to a degree, like, it really does. It does demean them. It, like, belittles them when they obviously, you know, we know that we can have them in our life as like a pet as such, but they're not. No, they're not supposed to be.
Yeah.
They were never bred to be, you know. So if you think of genetics is huge. It's huge.
Yeah, I mean, like, we've had so many conversations before that, like, every domestic dog has been bred for a purpose for a human, whether it be to be a working dog or to be, you know, have that not non-shedding, so that they're not, you know, people don't have allergies to them or whatever it may be. They've been bred that way for us, whereas dingoes have been created by nature. They've been created by nature to survive in their environment perfectly and be in tune with their environment. So the differences obviously are so huge. They've got these huge personalities and they're such independent animals. You know, they can't be treated as a dog. You know, they're so vastly different to dogs.
So, and you know, that next level is that social structure, you know, and they talk about like enzymes in the stomach being different compared to dogs and stuff like that. I mean, there's so much fluctuation on that individual case level, but so like around here, a lot of the stories I've heard is that dingoes have learnt to also survive off some of the farms around here to a degree, or you will see them, you know, so, you know, we got these large platforms of farms through our beautiful, what would be a rainforest tropical area, which is where our tropical dingoes would live. And these farms are usually avocados or macadamias. And I have learnt from many different people that dingoes can eat avocados.
What?
Yes.
Sorry, what?
Dingoes will eat.
I was telling Nellie not. She can't eat avocado.
So Turbo, my male, so my black, tan and white, he'll go eat a ton of them. And I've heard of other stories such as like, you know, I was talking to an Indigenous lady. She, many years ago, it must have been in like the 1970 floods around this area, something like that. And she was saying her dingo got locked out, and she was away. And the only reason why she reckons this dingo survived is because she had an avocado tree. And it's true. And I also have also heard of stories of when they harvest with big machines, the dingoes will come and eat the nuts as well. But in saying that, dingoes were also more prolific in those areas because something that they like to eat, which is less risky for them, is rodents.
Yes.
So rodents are a small meal, and these guys would learn to hunt them really well and efficiently. And why is there more rats? Because there's more avocado farms, because there's more macadamias. But we need them also because too many rats will eat too many seeds for our rainforest, and then, you know, that just turns again. So they're trying to be here. They're trying to do a job.
Yeah, they do have a job.
They do have a job.
Yeah,
it's bigger than what we understand and know. Like, I'm just telling you all these little stories that I've heard over time, and I find it really interesting.
And they have their like own lives that we just don't know so much about. You know, we have an insight to like just the smallest amount of who they are and what they do, and there's so much that we wouldn't know about them. But as you were saying, like their role in the environment is just so important, which maybe we should talk about that for a little while, because, you know, maybe a lot of people don't fully understand the impact that dingoes may have on an environment, what their role is.
We don't know, because technically from like a lot of like our generation has seen, dingoes have probably not been stable in a lot of areas because of baiting, because of hunting, and we see that. And so, you know, even till like say crocs, right? Again, they're in the same sort of bag situation. Your crocs, the population still isn't stable, right? And yet they're still talking about culling them again. You know, whereas the dingo, we only can see from certain farm owners or certain property owners, or like we don't even see the dingoes do a job in a national park because they bait there.
Because they still bait them.
Because they bait.
Yeah.
But if you look at the state of national parks compared to private property owners that have dingoes on the property, it's chalk and cheese, mate.
Yeah.
It's absolutely chalk and cheese.
Vastly different.
How many times do we have to say that a keystone species such as a dingo is going to change that domino effect all down? Like,
and taking them out of the environment is going to have an impact. Exactly.
Like, are we thick? You know?
No, we are.
You know?
Clearly. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because obviously recently landholders for dingoes have just brought out their study to show that I think it was 3 different landholders in totally different countries had basically kept dingo populations stable on their properties, and talking about those economic benefits that they're seeing because they're keeping kangaroo numbers down, or when I say down, I would say in balance with the environment that's there. So that's reducing the grazing pressure. And then obviously they're seeing all these other small marsupials sort of thrive in those situations. So it's really exciting to start seeing, you know, graziers coming out and sort of, I suppose, sticking their neck out in a way, because it's been such an ingrained thing to control dingoes on your property that I imagine it would be such a difficult thing for farmers, even if they didn't want to undertake these sort of baiting programs. If you look at the history of it, there's been points in time where it would have been illegal for landholders to not manage. And I think
It would have been bullied.
Yeah.
Been threatened, and they probably do.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah, and I still think definitely they would be up against that kind of stuff right now. So trying to sort of change those perceptions in farming communities to have, graziers come out and say, look, this has actually been good for business, and we need to protect these animals because our farming system actually relies on the health of our ecosystems. And if we don't have health of the ecosystem, then our farming system's going to fail ultimately. So, I mean, on that front, it's super exciting. But again, I think personally that this whole perpetuating of the wild dog myth and of all the things that are happening to our dingoes is largely due to the fact that poisons companies want to continue making money. So they're sort of pumping these rhetorics out to these communities that just keep people in this inherited state of thinking. And then you've got the added pressure of farming communities sort of, sticking within the things that they've kind of done for a long time, and people who sort of, deter from that path are often sort of outcast.
And it's kind of like a check off the list, I see. If you look at a lot of people in the last era, like we're such a microwave generation, it's got to be instant. So when you talk about baiting and we're like, we've got problems of drought, this, and this, wild dogs, they go, oh yeah, I'm going to physically, I can see this bait getting pulled out. I'm doing something because I have to do something. This is what I need to do. But it's obviously not the right thing. So that that's it's something physical, you can see it's tangible, but I was out on a job with a scent dog near Tenterfield, and we were meant to run the dog and try and find koalas through this property, and we couldn't do it in a certain area because the landholders have just laid bait, and we can't risk that for the dog. But in saying that, we rocked up to the house. There was about 20 to 30 dogs just running around. All of them, like some of them with your saggy nipples here and there. So they've just have popping out litters. And we go to also another property, goats. Goats everywhere, where we know that they've been laying bait, and it's so twisted, and you see, erosion, you see, all these plants that are feral plants coming into areas, it's just so, we see a tree and we just think, oh yeah, great, a tree. Oh, a tree, that's pretty, that's nice. Especially in this area, and Tevan, it's camphor's not good, and all of this actually comes back to, I think, the dingo.
Absolutely.
All of it. And we're so used to seeing it in that vision, but it's not the right vision.
I think I saw a video of you saying that you think dingoes could be, the key, a big part of solving the biodiversity crisis that we're dealing with in Australia, and I couldn't agree more. It's a really interesting one because I know the State of Environment report, sort of in response to that, the Labor government have brought out their zero extinctions plan, and their sort of I don't know what the other one's called. I'll find it for later. But zero extinctions was definitely one of them that's come out. And of course, dingoes are not on the list, but there's a bunch of different threatened species and endangered species that made it to that list. And something that they really sort of like to focus on is the impact that these invasive species have, which of course, I know that they have a huge impact, but cats and foxes, when we're talking about them over and over and over again as this huge risk to our native marsupials and other animals in the environment, and yet we're not going to talk about the fact that we don't actually need to undertake all these elaborate, trapping and killing schemes. No. We could actually just leave our dingoes alone. Exactly.
They'll do it for free, mate. You want to save money? You get a dingo to do your job for you, to do it well. That's right. I was in bed, I woke up and I looked down into the gully that we live near, and I saw like about maybe 5 dingoes, and a lot of people think in this area where I live we have wild dogs. That's the question. One of them threw out the grass just all of a sudden, I couldn't believe my eyes, a rabbit, and I was like, oh my god, wow, there you go. It's just like those little things, like when we have dingoes, I don't see rabbits, I don't see foxes. Those are just those little individual proofs that you see right there. And but it's it's such a big topic because of the dog DNA.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that dingoes have, like, think of our area where we are, the beautiful northern rivers, right? Dingoes have managed to somehow somewhat survive in this area. I mean, I don't know what their pack structure is like. I'm not claiming like I do, but we've had a black dingo that was roaming around area for I would say nearly 10 years, you know, and well, probably wasn't the same one, I doubt it, but this, and you know, a couple of years ago I saw it hit by a car on one of the roads, and I was like, oh, well, there you go, that's an end of an era right there. But this thing never harmed anything, and again, whenever we saw it coming around, which there was probably plenty more around, and yeah, we had those less feral species, but it's the colour is also the big topic.
Yeah, that's a huge one for people because they don't realise that dingoes can come in all these different colours. Yeah, they just have no idea. On the DNA, can you tell me, I know you have 2 wild-born dingoes, what percentage DNA are they?
Turd's black, tan, and white. He was found at a local waterfall, Killen Falls. He was said to be a shepherd cross Kelpie. Man, I wish I was more Kelpie. He'd be more obedient. So Turbo, we call him Turd because that just name suits him just so well. Yep. And he is 82-point-something%, I believe. And then my other one, which is the sibling to yours, Alix, is 80.7 or something like that. Yeah. So you're in that high 80%. So usually when we see dingoes, if they've got more than 70-80%, they're pretty much a dingo. They play that role. But it's not just the individual. It's that social structure, which we come back to all the time, which is the biggest thing that we don't let them develop because of baiting, because of shooting, because of that misunderstanding. You know, it'd be super interesting if we do get all these positive things passed for the dingo. What will happen? I'm so interested in the whole thing,
in how, you know, it will change the environment, because it ultimately will. And I guess when we talk about DNA, I think so often, you know, that huge focus on DNA totally closes out the culture aspect of it. And I call it culture, but it's ultimately obviously what parents pass down to the next generation. And I think that's something that potentially in conservation spaces we need to talk about more and more, because when you're cutting off that connection to the culture, of course, I was talking to Sonia Takau, who's up in far north Queensland, and she was saying, you know, animals are no different to us. If you're grown up in an area, you know where to go to get a feed, you know where to go to get water. If you take an animal out of that environment and just put them somewhere else, they're not going to know that country. That's not their country. So I think it's really interesting to think about what does make a dingo, because it's not just looking at their DNA. We're not just going to be sort of breeding them in captive situations and saying, well, that's just it. We're conserving the dingoes, because if you go and put, you know, your 2 captive breds in the wild.
I actually think if you were to try and put captive breds in the wild, you'd probably have more problems than if it was just like the wild borns that have that 80% DNA. Like, because they survived. They're here. They're bloody here, mate. Like, technically, you know, I look at the 2 dingoes that we have here, not the captive ones, our tropical ones here, that are classified as pets, which is crazy again. I think that is our local apex predator. That's all we have to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, other countries you have to deal with a bear, mate. A bear. People think we're tough handling, you know, venomous snakes and stuff. I'm like, mate, it's just a tail with a face. You gotta go something that's like a size of a little car. Bugger off! I'm not going near that, mate. You know, like, you know, it's just maddening. You know, and like, I mean, people scare me more than anything compared to, but like the dingo, you know, and people make up a lot of excuses in their area. They're worried about their dogs. They're worried about their kids. Like, I honestly believe that the hardest dog training clients that I've ever had in my life are rural dog training dog trainers or owners. You know, they don't have a fence. Yeah. Or they tether their dog, and the amount of stories that I've heard, their dogs get shot, or their dogs hang them when they're tethered. You know, just have a yard for your dog. Like, I got sent this image of I was talking to some folks on the socials about dingoes, and someone sent me a photo of, obviously, one of their pets had a few scratches from a wild dog. That's what they were claiming. And my first instinct was like, why? How did it happen?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no point sending it to me. I understand it's an apex predator. I understand it's an animal. Like, I can take all those personal, emotional, anthropomorphism thoughts out of it. Like, I understand what they are.
But what situation was your animal in that they were able to be accessed by a wild dog? Well, I mean, a dingo, you know?
Absolutely. Like, why? And we talk about genetics, de-sex your dogs.
Yeah.
De-sex your dogs.
We've really taken like personal responsibility out of like sort of animals.
Yeah.
I think like
Yeah.
it's always like
Or they'll be raw. Yeah.
Yeah, it's someone else's fault if your animal gets attacked by, you know, a wild dog or a dingo, obviously. Which, just for the record, there are no wild dogs. There are dingoes, and that's it. If they're surviving in the wild, to me, they're a dingo.
Yeah.
Regardless of what their percentage is. And to be fair, a lot of, if there is feral dogs in the wild, they're coming from agriculture. Like, they're sort of, you know, pups that have gone off and bred or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
They're coming from the industry that's then perpetuating that harm.
Exactly.
Which is, you know, so maddening.
And it's hard because, again, you see a lot of areas that are super wildlifey, you know, and you've got a lot of people that are, you know, have that thought process of things. Unfortunately, you know, they let their dogs roam. Oh, he won't hurt a fly. But there's not the point of that. If you have an entire dog, like, those instincts will come back straight away, and that common sense and that responsibility as an owner and understanding what you have and why you have it, you got to understand that. Like, with my dingoes, I don't take them around like they're my dogs because they're not my dogs. They're my dingoes.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, how I get them to approach people or my friends is different to my dogs. I have different expectations of them because they're not dogs. Yeah. You know, I don't desire them to do the same thing. So I try and fulfill those needs that they need and as much as possible. And I like to learn from them. But, yeah, they're very, very different. Yeah. Extremely different.
What would you say are some of like the main differences that you see between your wild borns and your captive breds, like in terms of behaviour and what I guess makes your wild born seem more wild to you?
Yeah. Well, aloofness is definitely one of the first things that you'd see. Again, this is hard because you're talking about training differences as well. But usually, like, they just take a lot more time to pick up on things as well. Like, as in, not to pick up on behaviours or training them, like, just to actually get closer with you. Yeah. They are not, they're not used to, say, a new person. They're going to be at that same level in that relationship as they are with person X over here, you know.
I kind of love that about them, though. I mean, yeah, it is smart, and it's and it reminds you that dogs once again have been bred for us, because I see when I go to the park, you know, people go to touch Nellie and she's always like jumps back, and people are kind of shocked by that. They're just like, why don't you want to be pat by me? Like, what's your and people will be like, oh, just a puppy, like she's just learning. And I just think we've made animals like be ours so much so that we expect that they just want to be touched as soon as you meet them. Whereas with dingoes, it's like, no, you actually have to earn my trust. You have to earn it, and I have to know that you're safe, and I have to have you have to build a relationship with them.
Because at the back of their brain, there was like, something might kill me. They are survivalists. That's what they were for. You know, like, you know, dingoes have roughly been here, they say, between 4,000 and 8,000 years for certain, but then there's evidence of 18,000. You know, that's and you get stories with the dingo coming along with the rainbow serpent. You know, how far away is that with the dread time? Like, doesn't that say something? But the biggest thing with Aussies, I find, is that Aussies are so renowned for reptiles. Right? And but when you look at reptiles don't really have that social, they don't have that social connection, you know. Whereas the dingo really, besides for in the apex predator or more dangerous species, they have that social structure. Totally. Which is a whole nother ball game. And then you see other countries that are loving their wolves because that's what they've always known. That's what they're obsessed with. That's what we should be with our dingoes. Totally. But they're being demonized by the agricultural industry. But yeah, I mean, and that topic of, you know, people wanting to, you know, reach in and just expect an animal or a canine or a dog to behave a certain way is 100% true. But it also goes back to the thought of, you think of breeds, we were talking about this before. Breeds aren't used for what they were used for originally. No. So technically, as a part of our evolution, should we still have them?
Yeah. No, I mean...
Like, it's a good discussion, you know? Totally. Like, I'm not saying I want to ban breeds. I'm not saying that at all. I think breeds are fantastic, and there are dangerous breeds out there because what they're bred for, you know? And that's why they have that reputation. But that's why dingoes have that reputation of being timid and aloof, and Houdinis, because they are. They're survivalists.
I mean, in my idealistic world that, you know, is not the one that we live in, we don't have pets in the way that we have them now, because I believe humans will always have relationships with animals, of course, but on their own terms, you know, in this idealistic world that doesn't exist, but creating animals and breeding animals for our use and for our sort of companionship, I suppose, to me is potentially something that we shouldn't have in an idealistic world, you know. But I do think that humans would always have relationships with animals no matter what. But it would just be that respect thing, that it's like, I'm not just taking you and making you mine because I need you for something or I want you for something. It's them making a choice to have a relationship with you and you making a choice to have a relationship with them, and that developing. And obviously we've seen that throughout history with First Nations people, the relationships that they would have with dingoes. It was very sort of benefiting both sides, you know. And I mean, I've got a friend who said he had a dingo growing up, and they got to the point where one day he would go out and hunt a kangaroo, and then one day his dingo would go out and hunt a kangaroo and bring it back, and then they'd have a feed, you know. So it's just such an interesting symbiotic relationship that can exist between humans and animals.
And that's probably one of the reasons why the amazing things have survived for so long.
Yeah.
You know, you think of like your local magpie, you think of your local populated species, they've been able to adapt to people. Totally. And our dingoes have managed to adapt, you know, talking about genetics or not, they've still been able to adapt and live there. If they were feral dogs, you'd be seeing them living in camps. Like, you'd see them living amongst in towns, like on those borders. Like, you know, what we view of wild dogs is not really the correct term.
I mean, when I think about when I've gone to different countries that do actually have a lot of stray dogs on the street, I mean, they don't behave anything like dingoes. They're sort of, you know, looking around for food scraps from people and stuff like that. Whereas, as you said, dingoes are super aloof. They're like sneaking in the night and kind of trying to keep hidden. You don't see that from a domestic dog that's just sort of gone stray. So,
and the social structure is huge. Like, again, it's always going to go back to that.
Yeah. And
it's just a massive thing. So, like, you know, I always say my pack, and I always understand that I'm going to have dynamics change in that pack. That's what they are. Yeah. So you got to be ready not to be offended by those things. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, but they're insanely smart animals, you know. They are incredibly smart. Like, who knows what they assess and watch? Like Edna, my girl, she'll watch a plane. You know, she'll follow a plane and watch a plane. She's so alert and in tune.
Zoom in on stuff.
They have incredible eyesight.
Yeah.
They have an incredible ability to find water, you know, and they're superhuman. Like, I always see in a dingo form, you know, like we have our law, right? We have the law that the governments, you know, control, and but the dingoes have a law. And they had the law, and they control all this, you know, they control all this land. And now our laws clash, and we don't understand what they do and their purposes, you know. So I just think that they need a chance, and they very much are showing a lot of evidence of being the keystone species and increasing biodiversity in Australia.
Exactly.
And think of how big Australia is.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's huge, mate.
It's interesting because I think I mentioned before we were talking to an ex-grazier recently, and he got his property from his father. He took it over, and they ran both cattle and sheep. And he basically said as soon as he took it over, he got rid of the sheep straight away and stopped baiting the dingoes. And the difference in the property that he saw was just huge and immense. But I think it's an interesting thing to think about. I don't know that we've ever had sheep farmers in a situation where they have let dingo populations be stable. I know there's obviously examples of that with cattle, and we talk about how dingoes can be such a huge risk to sheep, but I do wonder that given the opportunity, we would see similar results to what we see with cattle with the sheep as well, and maybe there just hasn't been the opportunity. I mean, at the end of the day, they're an apex predator, like we've talked about. They're going to hunt prey, but then again, with the stable pack structures as well, like if they've got their stable pack structure, they know their territory, they know how to hunt native prey, and they have a pack to do that with, would we see the same predation on sheep even, you know? Would it be the same?
Super interesting topic, isn't it? And we don't, you know, have we had that opportunity to see what, you know, I don't know. So. No, I don't think so either. And if you think of, like, for people that don't know, like your social structure of your dingo is extremely, extremely important to the fact that their territory, they were controlling that territory just like a croc would, right? And anybody coming into that territory, like say if there was another dingo or wild dog or dog, something coming into that territory potentially going, hey, I'm another carnivore, I'm another apex predator. So the dingo's job is say, hey man, like this is my place. Don't. And so even if they can't say, you know, get the animal and kill it, which is what they would do, that's a part of life, they will actually try and mutilate the reproductive organs of that other canine. Like,
That's actually crazy.
that's so smart.
Wow.
You know, like,
So they can't pass on their seed.
Yeah, and so that's why you can see, you know, when, say, my coolie and my dingo playing, my boys playing, when Turbo's running after the coolie, which he's so much faster than him, he's trying to grab his back legs, which is, of course, like a takedown tactic, but he also he's going towards that crotch area because that's what they're doing.
That's amazing. I just had no idea that they would do that. Yeah. Interestingly, as well, where we were talking about cats and foxes before, I always thought that it was like a predation thing. And the more research I've kind of done into it is that although they might predate on cats and foxes, it's not just about, they will actually just kill them for being in their territory. And then they change the behaviour of the cats and foxes in that area just from being present.
Yeah. So it's, I forgot the name for it. So it's the same as, so we recently filmed a little video at Tenterfield also about the spotted-tailed quoll. So yeah, really cool. And it was really cool to visit Quoll HQ because again, there's still a lot of learning to do in our wildlife industry for people that have been in the wildlife industry to learn about dingoes because they've jumped on the wild dog train as well, not thinking, not knowing, not having that education, right? And so it was the same here. And it's a really interesting topic because quolls, they are endangered. They're you know, very, their numbers are very bad, especially specifically in that area, but they're very picky. And that's why. They're picky. They're picky. Yeah. So now the dingoes, of course, they'd come in and they would kill the quolls because they're another apex predator. And the dingo's just like, this is my job, man. But what's the problem is because they have such low numbers, that's obviously going to really affect the quoll. And the quoll, they are very, very affected by fractioning. They're very picky when it comes to breeding. They're just not as adaptable. Yeah. Like, and that's what we're seeing. That's what we're hearing. So yeah, we have to isolate those populations to try and help the quolls if we want to increase those populations.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we're kind of in this situation where that's a huge part of conservation because that's what all you can do when you're, you know, surrounded by agriculture, you're surrounded by forestry or mining or whatever it may be, that we kind of have to have these designated areas to keep certain animals.
Yeah, he's having a laugh.
Who's this?
I actually, for a second, I was like, are you smart enough to put a quoll sound on? I swear I can hear like a and I was like, oh no, it's just the kookaburra.
Yeah, Katie, hit the quoll noise. We kind of are in this situation where that's what we've got to work with, is having these sort of designated areas to conserve a species, and we can't just sort of have, you know, these vast areas where whole ecosystems function because we are sort of grappling with all these different industries that obviously
no one's working cohesively together. That's the hardest thing about it all. You know, and like they're such an interesting topic because, you know, not only for their ability to play that role in biodiversity, but also because they are super efficient. And then when we're trying to bring other populations up, you know, there could be issues there. Like I don't 100% know, and that's why we need like, so Odonata, they're another one doing some quoll stuff, and again they will not open up their reserves until they know that there's stable dingo populations. Yeah. You know, because that's what's going to help them. Yeah. You know, that's the only way that they're going to do it. So, and that's awesome that an organisation like that is saying that and has that knowledge. Like, that's exactly what we need. But, yeah, like, I mean, the hunting capabilities of the dingo is just insane.
Yeah, no, I know. I've seen it in Nellie for sure. Yeah. It's just so innate. Like bang. And I love how they do the kind of like hopping like a kangaroo. Yeah. And then they do the like straight down. They're just insanely accurate and just so speedy and just
the flexibility of things as well. Like you see a lot of them, you know, Turbo, he'll like twist his body and his bum's still up in the air, and I'm like, mate, how are you holding that position? You know, and you know, not to mention like the aerial jumping that they would do for birds and stuff like that. And then you put that into a pack form, oof, you know, that's going to be a very, very smart, cunning animal. And that's why they need that structure, because like, mate, those animals are extremely smart.
Yeah, well, we were actually talking before about how there has been evidence, particularly sort of in the Mansfield area in Victoria, of packs being capable of taking down sambar deer, which is just incredible when you think about how big a sambar deer is, and the way that, I mean, I've seen them do it sort of in creek beds or sort of bodies of water where they're kind of working together to drown that animal. Like the way that they can work together in their pack is just unreal.
And that goes back to your you know, a really good conversation that you brought up, is how is that those pack of dingoes there, and then you've got a captive dingo, little captive dingo. You know, how is he supposed to learn that that's how we take down these prey items efficiently? It's the same as like killer whales, you know, different locations where they come from. You know, it's the whole thing, isn't it?
When you're cutting off that culture, how are they supposed to receive that knowledge from, you know, that's been passed down for generations? That's such an important part of what makes a dingo, is getting from their parents what their parents got from their parents and their parents and their parents. And I think we don't think about how significant that is, that they're the keeper of knowledge, you know. Yeah, they're the keepers of knowledge and continue passing that down. That's such a significant thing that makes that animal who they are. And if we're raising them in sort of captive environments, they're not getting that same
choosing the mates. You know, and then even so, are these captive dingoes, are they actually in a stable pack structure themselves, or are they kept in individuals or two? Because a lot of areas will do that because they don't want any blues or problems, which I understand that, but in saying that is all a part of it. That it's all a part of it. I mean, we see keeping dingoes as more of a dog, but we should actually look at keeping dingoes like more of a lion pride.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, they are. They're like the lions of Australia when you put it that way.
Absolutely. And if you think of them like, you know, when we look at that big, powerful animal, but we see it differently because we physically could probably have a bit over this animal. And that's also one of the reasons why we can have them still in our houses as pets, is purely the size. You look at people with wolf dogs and they struggle. You know, you know, that animal is so large. You know, yeah. So yeah, it's a super duper, super massive topic, and I don't know. You know, I always say, like, I don't know. This is just
We don't have all the answers, but we can have a chat about it. We need to. Yeah.
Absolutely, and like, you know, our dingoes. You know, I saw there was a fella again on the socials, good old socials, and he's like, you know, I'm an Indigenous man. I've been living in this area for a long time, and he actually said that he's never heard of dingoes in this area. But in saying that, again, you got to understand what people's experiences are. You know, if he's lived in town, and even if you lived on the edges of town, if you had a stable pack structure, you really wouldn't see a dingo. You really wouldn't see them.
I had no idea that we had them in Victoria. Like, I just didn't know. And so many people that I, you know, said, well, we have dingoes in Victoria. People were like, what? We have dingoes in Victoria? I'm like, yeah, they're up in the mountains, bro. Like, they're here. Yeah, totally. Interesting when you were talking about like the flexibility of them and stuff. I think it would be cool to talk about some of like the physical differences between dingoes and dogs, because obviously we see that in Eddie and Nellie. We know that they've got all those like physicality things that make them a dingo and not a dog.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, and it also goes straight into behaviour as well. So a couple of things that we always say, this is the common one, dingoes are known to howl and yap, not really make that barking sound. You can really see that whilst watching the canines that we had here today playing. You know, one of them who's a cattle dog, border collie mix is just barking the whole time while playing, and the rest of them, which are most of them are dingoes or a large dingo hybrid, are just silent as. So there you go. Good understanding of communication there.
I really appreciate the non-barking as soon as I get around dogs who do bark.
Well,
I'm just like, ooh.
Now when you see dogs and how they play, you're like, this is actually so weird. Like, this is actually not normal. This is a weird communicator. This usually means this. You're getting a bit insane. No wonder why we have problems. Anyway, so the next one that we always point out is the size of the teeth. So compared to a domesticated dog of the same size, usually teeth size is really different. The next big thing is flexibility.
Yes.
Yeah, so like Turd, my dingo, my male dingo, he shows off his flexibility like I've never seen anything before. Like he can jump, I don't know how high, much taller than me, but like, I'm like, get in there, you Turd, get in there, get up there. And he's lazy because he's a boy, so he puts his front feet up, right? And then I'm behind him going, go on mate, jump up there, and he looks at me just fully backwards, just looks at me like this all the time. You walk around him, he'll always just look backwards at you, and the neck is insane, and the tongue flops around, but his flexibility, but also they're way more put together. Like I can, I'm very physical with my dingoes. Like I wrestle with them, and you need to be, because they love it. If you know it, that's actually how you bond. That bonding through play and just physical touch is very important. You can't skip that. With dogs, you can skip that because of genetics, right? And like I can actually fully pull both the dingoes around, whereas if I tried to do that with my coolie or my shepherd, I'd like dislocate a hip or something like that, or like I'd injure their spine, or like I'd throw a shoulder out or something like that. But then, like Edna, I carry her on my back all the time. I just like carry her like.
Yeah. I'm the same.
All the time. Like by like she's so diverse, and like I can hold her and she's like, oh yeah.
It's like when Nellie's playing at the park with other dogs, and sort of a dog will go and like bowl her over, and people are going, oh, I'm like, don't worry, she'll be right. She just and then just runs off. Like, no worries. Yeah. They're just so like resilient.
And we're talking about not a great topic that everybody would like to know, but so general pet dogs, you usually have to get your dog's anal glands expressed, right? Because they're that bred that they can't, and they get problems. They get pussy and all these things. Whereas the dingoes, and we've actually experienced this with ours, they can release the anal glands. Now is that not genetic superiority? I don't know what is.
I don't know why, but I kind of expected it to not be a thing. I was just like, this is right. But of course, when you like are saying that, I'm like, oh, of course that makes sense. Like she's just doing it herself.
Yeah, she's just doing what she's meant to do. Yeah, because that smell it. Yeah. Oh man, it got in my mouth once, and it was bad. Because usually we always cover the tail. We're like, oh, just in case. I've had to clean it off the walls a couple times, and then one day, the one time I didn't block, and I was getting up at the same time, all down the side of my face, and I was like, ah! I deal with shit all the time. I deal with poo all the time, but that...
I feel like it's worse than poo. I don't know.
No, it is. It's very concentrated. Yes, but look, on the last note, the biggest thing that sets dingoes a bit apart from dogs is genetics. So we talked about how long that they've been bred in the environment, not bred by people. If you think about if you want to go into research of genetics, you can do that, because that can take a long, long time. But dogs are so specifically bred. Think about it. We've got a dog that looks like they've run full speed into a glass door. They can't breathe properly. They can look at both owners at once. Like they are not a dingo. And in some levels, some scientists class them as the same. Yeah. And I'm like, what? You can't play. It can't play the part of the dingo. No. It can't play the part. So when you look at, like, I think of all the physical problems that I've had with my dog compared to my dingoes. Again, that's something.
Nellie's like waterproof as well. Like, when I say waterproof, she gets wet, but like she just dries so quickly. I like get her in the shower, give her a wash if she's, been frolicking in mud and gross stuff, and get out, just towel her off, and she's dry. She's done. Like, I've never seen, like, just all the different little things about her that I'm just like, oh, that makes sense though. Like, if you're in the wild, you've got all this coarse hair, you're going to go for a swim, you're not going to stay wet for ages, you're not going to get cold, like, you're going to dry. Yeah. It's just so interesting to see, even those just like tiny little differences that you're like, oh, that's really smart. That makes sense. And once it's an interesting concept there with, like, you and Nellie, and obviously you guys have mates that she would know. But so she's a single canine, right, in your pack, or whatever you'd call it. I have a pack of 5, right? And like, people always ask me, like, can you have dingoes with other pets and stuff like that? And I'm like, look, you're risking it. But in saying that, if you do it properly and you teach the animal over time, and it's not going to happen with everyone, like you're putting yourself at risk here. Like, I've got a cat.
And he's a lunatic, which is probably why he fits in so well. But, like, I had to, over time, be like, he's a part of our pack, so it comes to do with that greeting, that playing, that grooming sessions. Like, he has to be amongst it. Same as my older dog. He has to be amongst it. Otherwise, he's going to get bullied and they're going to push him. And you've got also all those other instincts, and those instincts can sometimes be more intense with the animal at a higher state of mind. So, like, when they're playing and there's a bit more pack mentality. So something that I've just recently learnt with my male dingoes, he's very, very, very in tune with me. And I was vocally getting up one of my parents' dogs. I was like, leave it, to move him. And I was grabbed Percy's collar. And Turbo, because I was giving a vocal correction, I grabbed him, and I was confident and firm with my body language, because this dog was doing the wrong thing. I was giving vocal correction, moving him on. And Turbo comes in and says, you better listen to her, and just gave him a good old nip on the bum.
So he was like, he was backing you up. Yeah.
He was backing me up like a pack. And I mean, we do see that sometimes with dogs, and that sometimes is, but that was clear, pure, just that. Like, there was no other genetic or behaviour for any other reason. It was purely to back me up, because I was the leader, and like, it may sound strange.
Take a walk, mate.
Yeah, he was like, I'm going to help you. So I got to be aware that if I'm in some sort of frantic situation where maybe if like an animal's injured or one of my dogs injured and I'm trying to help, that to him that will look like me maybe hunting or hurting or trying to eat that animal, because that's what that energy is. It's all happening. So he would come in and try and help with that.
Yeah,
and that's what they're meant to do, because that's what he thinks. That's what his job is to help me.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? So then thinking of that, and then all the other information of like how they would hunt in different locations, different animals, we know that a lot of your top Queensland, Far North Queensland dingoes hunt pigs. How would their breeding, their hunting structures, how would that change from alpine dingoes?
And we've talked about, them killing cats and foxes and controlling their populations, but just to have it out there on the record, they've killed pigs, cats, foxes.
Goats are one of the biggest problems for Australia as well.
Yeah. I mean, hard-hooved animals in general, they just are not good for the environment.
Breed, they're very good. They're very good at what they do, but that's very bad at what for our environment. They strip the bark of our local native plants, and it's just very bad. But dingoes, whoa. Government, did you know that they eat them for free? Yeah. And
stop controlling the goats. We've got the dingoes, yeah. That's so interesting. I guess, like, the verdict here is that DNA is not everything, but it's important. But it's culture as well. It's the two of them together. So when we're looking at DNA, whilst it's important, having this sort of heavy reliance on 100% DNA, it's more nuanced than that. Like, if they're 100% dingo DNA and in a captive situation like we've talked about today, they might not be as dingo as your two wild-born dingoes that are sort of in the 80% range. So that's a really interesting one. And just sort of lastly, I guess, to sort of finish this off, I want to talk about, does this sort of idea of breeding animals in captivity where they're losing that culture that's passed on from their parents, does that sort of make us need to have a conversation around how well breeding programs can help species survive? Or do we need to have a bigger focus on protecting the species that are already in the wild?
Yeah, it's a good conversation. Something that I definitely wouldn't say that I'm an expert in. No. I think it would be very species reliant, and also depending on numbers. Like, for example, like your northern hairy-nosed wombat, there's only about 315 left in the wild. Wow. So there's only two. Well, a lot of people don't realise there's a wombat that comes from Queensland. Come on. Come on, Maroons fans, what are you doing? They don't know about their indicators. They don't know about their northern hairy-nosed wombats.
Well, I mean, 87% of the state, I think it is. I could be wrong on that stat, but 87% of the state is grazing land.
Yeah.
Queensland. So we've obviously had and there's heaps of mining up there as well. So
So, when you look at a population like that, I guess there's a few things that you got to consider. And this, I guess, is an interesting point, because, I mean, I have a bit of experience, obviously, with captive animals. We have pretty much a captive facility. My question would be, like, can you actually produce an environment where they will breed? are they going to feel safe enough? I would suggest, as someone also who understands animals from a behaviour point of view, can you somewhat do more of like that quoll sanctuary? Can you create a bit more of a natural habitat in that area to breed? That'd probably be a really good point. For something, but like a wombat, generally they're solitary, but in saying that, again, that environment is always going to help them, because that's the environment they're going to live in. So that's where they should be to grow, to learn, to survive. If you think of a dog and we want to have it live in this type of lifestyle, we start implementing those lifestyle things when it's young. So it's the same thing, but on that wild scale. Look, I mean, from a dingo perspective, I don't think we need to.
No.
At the end of the day, no. Because we know and we can see that if we leave those dingoes alone, they can create that social structure. They have that history. But then also evolution then says, then if the dingo is the animal that is superior and going to be that apex predator, that dog DNA over time should go away, should disappear. Yeah. And then what's left is we should have a dingo. How many generations that will take, I don't know.
Well, I mean, the girls, they are said to potentially be 2 generations back, wasn't it? That there's been some interbreeding with domestic dogs. So it's crazy to think that it was 2 generations ago, but they've still got that 20%. So thinking of it, and they're so dingo. So obviously, I mean, as you said, there's research that's come out to show that the dingo DNA is dominant DNA anyway.
Yes. But even if you think of it like as a dominant DNA, like you're saying this percent, right? Like this much percent, and then you got the dog percent. Like, yeah, sure, physically you can see that percentage, but like how much is actually playing? Yeah. Like, I guess that's probably how you should view it, as like a dominant gene. Like, it's pretty much probably void. Like, it's nothing. Like, because all those genetics are way more seen and way more confident compared to those dog genetics. Because that's what they want to revert to. They want to revert to surviving. They're an animal that needs to survive. They want to survive through thick and thin and anything. Everything's meant to kill me. So that genetics, everything's meant to kill me. Yeah. That's what they think, so... It's a really really good topic. I don't think so. I mean, my sort of dream, Alix, in regards to captive dingoes. I think that there's a lot of wild-born dingoes or dingoes that do need help. I don't think anybody should be breeding dingoes. That's just my personal view, and I can have that view. I can have that view. That's fine. You can have your own view, but I personally don't think dingoes need to be bred in captivity, because I think that we have more than enough information to train wild-borns, and more than enough information and space in captive
environments
already.
Yeah.
And
so they need it. Like, I mean, they're coming in all the time, and we don't have
individuals.
Homes, yeah.
We don't need to make more individuals that need more food, that need more resources that we're already struggling to supply. How I think it would be so much cooler if I went to a facility, no matter what animal it is, and be like, oh yeah, this is Jeff. He's a galah and he has one wing. And because he was hit by a car, guys, we need to make sure we're not, we're driving, not doing a dusk. And if we do have an accident, that we have a kid in our car, or we do something, we make an effort, that is a cool story. Yeah. And that's where I would like to see the future of wildlife facilities to go. And in saying that, I'm not someone who's had a massive history or a tons of experience compared to others and I think that there's a lot of research that also is done in captive facilities to learn about how to actually look after them health-wise. So, and then that can in turn then help, say, if we do have something wild, oh yeah, these vets here have done this, great, we know that information to put that there. They wouldn't have that information otherwise. And that's pretty much all I know, really about the whole thing. Like, there's probably going to be a need for, like, those dingoes that are taken out of wildlife areas, they can't be put in back at this point in time.
They're not safe if they are. No, and it's illegal. I mean, for the record, I think it's $300,000 fine.
I can't tell you how many people, when I had the litter and I was raising them, wanted to take them, to breed them, and to release them. And I'm like, lovely thought, I guess. But you don't understand, obviously. You don't understand, because simply now we've taken away. We are not letting the nature do its thing of breeding the apex predator of that litter.
Totally. Where's their parents? Where's their pack?
Yeah, we can't do it. We can't do it. We don't know enough.
And I mean, legally, we're not allowed to do it right now. So we really need to work on sort of changing the laws that are sort of letting dingoes down for them to actually be fully protected in the wild. And then we can start looking. I mean, we wouldn't even need to be rescuing the wild-borns because they would be left alone, which would be, you know, pipe dream. Amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd love to create a facility where one day we rescue and work with wild-born dingoes or dingoes that need a space, and then we develop confident structures of a pack and then supply them to a wildlife facility if they wanted them, and they come with a full set of training and they're comfortable with each other. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of unseen issues and those are things that we'd have to figure out, but I think there's a good need for it.
I think there is, and I mean, like, I can obviously speak to the fact that I think you guys gave, you know, Nellie the best start ever because she's just adapted so well to being, you know, in my life and like in a domestic situation when you think about where they've come from. So having that like basis of training and like the expertise that you guys have was just like, I think, such a great foundation for her. I think we've gone to an hour.
We've
so
pretty much
we
covered
could keep
it.
going, but thank you so much for chatting with us today and the amazing work that you guys are doing. And yeah, I think education is the way forward, and I think that you two are just really doing amazing stuff in that respect.
Giving it a red hot go.
Yeah, mate, that's all you can do.
Awesome. Well, if they like it, we can do a part 2 ever if you want it. And you might even meet the other one.
Yeah, no, we definitely will.
So
we'll get
the
the other one
7-minute
out.
younger one. Yeah. No worries, Alex.
Younger.
Thanks, guys. Younger.
Thank you so much. All right.
All right.
See you later.
Peace, guys.